So I want to start with your bio, which is fascinating. When I was 12, I was not founding a company or thinking much about growing a business. So perhaps you can tell us just a bit about how that came about and how somebody doing that when you were 12 thought not only about that, starting a business, but growing businesses as well. By the time, I think before you had a driver's license, you had multiple businesses, or you'd grown the business.
Well, here's the good news. I was not good at many other things.
Yeah.
I was like a terrible student. I was a terrible athlete. But business was the one thing that I was pretty good at, and I loved it ever since I was a little kid. So different kids grow up with different things. I grew up with a huge love of business, and I was fortunate. Somebody said to me when I was a young kid, when I was 11, 12 years old, they said, hey, you love business so much, you love skiing, why don't you start a ski tuning shop? And I did that in my parents' basement, and like a lot of entrepreneurs, one thing led to another, and it was always around business that was my true passion.
How have you found ideas? How have you found ideas that you wanted to capitalize on or grow through your career? Has that changed, or is that something that's been kind of a constant since you were a preteen? And that's still difficult for me to say.
Yeah. Preteen is difficult. I have a preteen now, and they're difficult. So yeah. I definitely agree. For me, I think the way I've always got the best ideas is by being a sponge to people around me. I think by being a great listener. So I think, if I think of when I started GSI Commerce in 1999, it's an interesting story because I knew nothing at all about e-commerce and nothing about the internet. And we had I was a 25-year-old kid. We had a $200 million wholesale sporting goods and footwear company. And the big rage and the big excitement was about e-commerce. And everyone said to me, how do you think about this thing? I said, I'm not. I've got this, I'm gonna beat Nike, which was maybe the dumbest thing I could have ever thought. Or, I'm gonna beat Adidas. And very quickly, after somebody said to me, how are you gonna take your business online? I did what any good entrepreneur would do. And I started calling our biggest customers. So I called the owner of Sports Authority, or the CEO of Sports Authority, the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods, the CEO of Modell's. And everyone said to me the same thing. They said, we don't understand this e-commerce thing, but our boards are putting a lot of pressure on us to figure it out. And you're a young guy and we trust you. So if you know what to do, come help us and do it. And that's how I started my company. So my point is, it was about kind of listening to the environment, listening to the market, and kind of identifying trends. And so for me, nothing's really changed from when I was, 8 years old, and it would snow, and I'd have 5 kids working for me, selling the snow shoveling in my neighborhood. Yeah. And I identified that trend to when it was, a trend of what our business is today. I've always been good at, kind of listening to those trends.
Yeah, as you talk, I hear a lot of signs of entrepreneurial instinct. And I wonder, as you think about what makes a good entrepreneur, as you meet with people, as you enter into deals with people, do you think that's something that can be taught? Is it something innate, or is it something that one can develop, the ability to see as you see, to be a sponge, as you say?
That's a great question. I'd say I think it's more something that you're born with. And so I think that, again, people have different things that they're good at. I was born with that entrepreneurial bug, and that those entrepreneurial skills, for better or for worse. A lot of other things I was not good at. So I think certainly if you have good listening skills and good learning skills, you can definitely learn from others. But I think the true entrepreneurial skill is something that you're born with.
Just get your sense of what retail looks like today. From where I sit, if I'm on radio or TV, guest after guest
Brutal.
after guest says it. You put
Brutal.
the word.
Yeah.
So pick your adjective. But how has it changed? You look back on when you started, when you got into e-retail. Yeah. Could you have envisioned that we'd be where we are today when you were starting out?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I started in 1999, we had this, we were a public company, I don't know, we were an early high flyer in 1999. We had this investor deck, and, we had these growth projections. I think we had global e-commerce getting to 10% of total retail. And we used to say, this is crazy. Yeah. This is never going to happen. But, Farsa put these projections out, so we're going to go with them, and we're going to use them for our investors. But, no one really believed e-commerce would be 10% in 1999. And, today, I'm in a business where, Fanatics, which is a $2.2 billion licensed sports, global retailer / biggest, retailer of licensed sports merchandise in the world, that category, it's probably already 30% online, and I bet it's going to be 50% online in another 5 years. So we definitely had no idea how big it would be when we started, and that's when I'll take a premise that sometimes it's just lucky. It's just good to be lucky, and I think we were lucky.
Good to be lucky, and you look back on when you were starting out. You obviously believed in what you were doing. Were you aware that there was some blind faith involved at the time, that this was a new terrain, e-commerce was new? There were probably a lot of doubters and haters out there as well you had to come up against.
You know,
how did you face that?
I'd say the great thing about being a kid is you're fearless. And so you have no fear. And so I don't think I ever really thought, you know, when I started, it probably wasn't until we became a real company that I had any fears. And I probably still don't have a lot of fears, but, you know, certainly as a kid, I think I was, you know, very fearless. And so I can't tell you that we did the analysis when I started GSI. I mean, my analysis was the CEO of Sports Authority, the CEO of Modell's, the CEO of Dick's Sporting Goods, you know, said, hey, we need a solution. And I'm going to figure a solution out and sell it to them. Then we're going to figure out how to actually deliver it. And hopefully it works out.
You've acquired companies. You've had companies that have been acquired as well. Has your sense of deal making changed? How do you approach a deal?
You know, we're in the business of, you know, Fanatics, which is my biggest business. We're in the rights acquisition business. We're always buying and acquiring rights. And so I think it's you know, it's a core skill set that the company possesses. I think fundamentally, probably the biggest thing that I've learned in business is that, like, life is too short to not do win-win deals. And if you can't do a deal that's good for both sides, like, don't do it. And so I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, I might have thought if it was a good deal for us, didn't need to be a good deal for somebody else. Today, I'd say it needs to be a real win-win. And I'm serious about that, because you want to build a great business that's doing great things, that's, you know, making the world a better place, in our case, making sports fans happier. And so I think, you know, win-win deals are really important.
You look at retail, and you have these two titans, especially in e-commerce. You've got Amazon, you've got Alibaba.
Yeah.
How intimidating is it to look out on that landscape and see those two peaks there? You obviously want to compete against them.
Yeah.
Big multi-billion-dollar
But actually, you don't
company.
want to compete against them.
Well, explain that. Why is that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, I say all the time that there are two companies in e-commerce that are going to control most of e-commerce. So if you're kind of competing with them, you're going to go out of business. And so, you know, at my old company, GSI Commerce, I remember, I was just talking about this last night. I used to do a once-a-year State of the Union presentation for all of our partners. And we had companies like Ralph Lauren and Toys R Us and Estee Lauder and Dick's Sporting Goods there. And I remember in 2006, 2007, I had a deck, and it showed that Amazon at that point, I think they were about $30 billion in revenue. I said, this will be the largest retailer in the world at some point. And when I got done, everybody told me what an idiot I was. And in general, they may have been right, but not about that. So, you know, you definitely have learned that these are two massively successful companies. And for me, the way we think about it is we have a completely different business. So what I believe is that the next chapter in e-commerce is really about what we call v-commerce, which is verticalized e-commerce. And so Amazon and Alibaba are selling other people's merchandise. They're selling Hasbro, they're selling Sony, they're selling, you know, commonly available products. What Fanatics is all about is building our own merchandise. So from designing the merchandise to developing it, to sourcing it, to selling directly to the end consumer. So it's really proprietary merchandise. Think about an H&M, but it's really an online version of an H&M, because most of our revenue is e-commerce driven. So I believe if you're going to be successful online, you better not be trying to compete with Amazon or Alibaba head on, because you're going to lose for sure. You need to do something that's very different. And what we do is very different, which is we're completely vertical from product conception until delivery to the fan. And that's it's a much different business.
Building up on that, how vast, how intricate does the infrastructure component of that have to be for you to be able to do that, to make this long vertically integrated trail? How much infrastructure do you have to build? How much do you have to oversee?
A lot. I mean, to put it in perspective, we'll spend in technology this year $120 million for an annual technology spend. We have 4,000 or 5,000 full-time employees, more than 10,000 employees during peak holidays. And by the way, a lot of people probably some of you know who Fanatics is.
Yeah.
Others would know us from we run NFL Shop, NBA Store, Major League Baseball e-commerce, NHL Store. So anytime you buy a licensed sports merchandise online, it's generally from us. And so there's a big investment in infrastructure for us, and we're aggressively investing in that business. Today international is only 10% of our business. North America is 90%. We're aggressively growing the international market, so there's massive investment there. So big investments in technology, mobile, big marketing spend, big infrastructure to build out all the capabilities to kind of verticalize the business. So, but that's for us the opportunity. We think we have an enormous opportunity in front of us. We think we've got honestly after Amazon and Alibaba, I think we have one of the greatest opportunities in all of technology and e-commerce.
How do you assess when you're looking at e-commerce, say, what's going to be a flash in the pan versus something that has longevity? As Carol said, you oversee Rulala as well. There aren't many flash sale deal sites around anymore. How is yours still around? What have you done well that others haven't? And could you look back on that and say, by and large, this was a big flash that a lot of people didn't capitalize on?
Yeah, well, I think generally speaking, in any business where there's a lot of opportunity, there's a ton of competition. And so what we've generally seen is in any new market, competition races into it, and then what generally happens is 95% of the players go away, and the couple that remain get much stronger. For me, you asked how do I evaluate what's a good business in e-commerce. What I try to do is look at two things. What's the size of the market opportunity? And then what do the order economics look like? And that's pretty simple. So if someone says, hey, I want to go sell furniture online, and we say, well, how big is the total furniture category? How much of it could be online? And how much is done by other people, and can we displace them or not? So I'm very big on size in the market. And then it's like, what do the order economics look like? We say in our business, the average order in Fanatics is $80. The average order in Rulala is $130. Then you look at the gross margin in that category. In Fanatics, we have 50% gross margins today. They'll be much larger over time as we keep getting vertical. And you say, here's how much money you can make per order. So that's a good business. Other businesses, you can see right away, you're like, this is a dumb idea. It doesn't work. If someone says, I've got a $50 average order, I've got 10% gross margin, well, you can't make money when you look at what it costs to fulfill an order, what it costs for the credit card transactions, just the variable costs don't work. So to me, it's size of market and the order economics.
You got a big company, a lot going on. You're all over the country, as you say, in international markets as well. How do you focus on what's central to the business as you're expanding? Just how do you keep track of everything?
Yeah, well, for me, the thing that I probably learned very early in life is to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. And there are certain things I'm pretty good at, and there are a lot of things I stink at. And for me, it's all about building the right organization around you. So in each of our three businesses, I have three great CEOs. They run the business. I'm the executive chairman of each of them. And so they're, kind of building the business on a daily basis, and I'm working with them strategically on how we can really grow it much more quickly. I think for me, what I recognized when I sold my last company, GSI Commerce, I had 12 or 15 direct reports. I wasn't, a good operator. And I said, I'm going to get this right next go around. And so the two things I changed was one, I was going to hire CEOs of each of the businesses and have, just work directly with them. And two, I was going to stay laser focused. And for me, the biggest thing I got wrong at my old company was I didn't love our core business. And we kept doing new things. And every time we did a new thing, the core business operated less well. When we started, again in 2011, after eBay bought our business, we had three companies. We said we're going to do nothing new. We've been laser focused, and that's got exponentially better outcomes.
I was going to ask you what Madison Avenue is going to look like in 5 or 10 years. That's probably a bad example, but when you think about retail, brick and mortar retail, maybe it's the King of Prussia Mall. Maybe it's another shopping mall in the greater Philadelphia area. What's it going to look like? You're dealing with licensing. You're dealing with rights.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff is going to be. A lot of that product is going to be sold in stores. What's the retail landscape going to look like outside of the e-commerce world?
Yeah. So first, I'd say Madison Avenue will still look good, and I think the King of Prussia Mall will still look good. But I think what you generally have is it's simple math, which is all of the growth in retail is being absorbed by e-commerce. Okay. And then all of the growth in e-commerce is being absorbed by Amazon and Alibaba for the most part. So essentially, you could say all growth is being absorbed by Amazon and Alibaba. So at the highest level, I think you're going to have a lot less malls, and you're going to have a lot less retailers. And what you're going to have is, like any industry, you're going to have winners and losers. But the winners are going to be people that do something special, different, and unique. And the losers are going to be people that are doing something that's commonly available. So to me, if you're a retailer selling commonly available inventory that the internet can commoditize, get out now. That's my mentality. If you're doing something special, unique, if you're you know, Lululemon, if you're, you know, Nike, you know, you've got a great brand, then I think you've got a reason to be. If you're H&M, if you're Uniqlo, if you're, you know, Zara, you've got a reason to be. So I think there's going to, you know, overall retail is going to be very difficult, but there's still going to be lots of winners. There'll also be more losers than there are winners. But I think at the highest level, if you've got all growth being consumed by Amazon and Alibaba and e-commerce, essentially, then you've got increase of costs, right? Because labor goes up every year. And so essentially you've got rising costs with all the capacity being sucked out by e-commerce, and that means the brick and mortar box overall is going to be, every year it's going to get more difficult. And you know, I see people all the time, they're like, hey, my e-commerce business is great. Like, I'll give you you know, an example of a retail without using them by name, $5 billion retailer. And they were doing $500 million online 7 years ago. Now they're doing $1.5 billion online. And their e-commerce business is amazing, and that's great. Here's the problem. They had to add lots of employees for e-commerce, lots of warehouses, lots of infrastructure. But the stores that used to do $4.5 billion are now doing $3.5 billion with the same store base. Okay? That doesn't work. So, you know, so you got to really quickly differentiate what's going to be a long-term winning model from a consumer perspective and what's not.
How much time do you give yourself when you start something new, and maybe you're unsure if it's working out? How much time do you give yourself to see if, in fact, it is? I think back on Amazon when it got into web services, and there were so many people who thought, what's Amazon doing? Core focus here is retail. Why would you be getting into that? And then you look at financials for Amazon today. It's such a huge component of how well they've done. When do you decide to call it quits? How long will you hold on to something thinking that's the right thing to do?
Completely depends on what I'm doing. Because from my perspective, you got to keep asking yourself, do you have it right? If you have it right, I'll stick with it no matter how many. If the rest of the world thinks I'm wrong, I actually love that. Like, you know, there are investments that I've made in business investments in a particular new initiative, and it's not working, but I really believe in it. And so I'll double down, I'll triple down, I won't care. Then there's other times I'm like, I got this completely wrong. After 3 months, I'll, you know, pull the plug and say, we're done. So it's completely dependent on the ability to keep peeling back the layers and say, do we have this thesis right or wrong? And if it's right, I'll stick with it forever.
You're partial owner of the 76ers. I wonder if you enter into something like that thinking that it's going to be a good business decision. You strike me as somebody who likes sports, passionate about sports, so you go to a lot of Sixers games. Is that something that you would have done if the math necessarily didn't make the most sense from the get-go?
I don't think so.
It's a business. You got into it for business.
Yeah, so I got into it for a mix of wanting to win first and foremost, the business opportunity, and the synergies that it would help me to make Fanatics a better company. I would help to make the Sixers better. So I think there was a tremendous amount of strategic overlap. But you know, I had a thesis, and I've been pretty public about saying this from, you know, when we spun out of eBay in 2011. You know, I believed that the sports industry was going to be a big growth business with better economics each year, and I think it's proven out to be that. So everything hasn't worked in sports. There's lots of things that have worked and lots of things that haven't worked. But I think in general, sports has been a great industry, and you know, there's been, look, I mean, we bought the Sixers for $265 million in 2011. You know, today the average NBA teams were probably worth $1.4 billion, $1.5 billion. So there's, you know, certainly that was a, you know, lucky and good investment. Not quite the Patriots, but you know, we aspire to follow their both success on the field or the court and off the court from a business perspective.
I want to ask you about politics kind of indirectly here. There's a lot of conversation in Washington, outside of Washington, about how you encourage more entrepreneurship, how you get business going, get business running better than it is. Let's start biographically. When you look back on your career, how much of that do you attribute to things that were put in place by the government? Is it something that you're aware of? Is there more that Washington could do? Yeah,
so I'm going to be brutally honest here. From my personal perspective, I don't focus on politics at all. I've always had this mentality, control what you can control, and don't worry about factors that you can't control. And people think, especially as we get bigger, people say it's stupid, it doesn't make sense. But I feel like we have so much upside within our existing businesses. Why should I focus on something that I don't have any control of? And a great example would be all of the chatter about what's going to happen with border tax, NAFTA. I've literally heard, I mean, the amount of analyst reports that have been sent to me, the amount of people that want to have conversations with me, I'm just like, I can't control it, so I'm not even going to think about it. I'm going to think about how do we keep growing our business? How do we do a better job for fans? How do we keep executing well? So that's my own mentality. That said, I think this is a very business-friendly world today, and I feel fortunate. Like, America is in my view, the best country in the world, and it has afforded me lots of great opportunities. And I was 16 years old, and I almost went bankrupt 3 different times in business as a teenager. And I figured out how to work through that, and I had great people around to learn from. So to me, like, we're in a great world. It's lots of opportunity. It's we can make it whatever we want to make it. But I'm not going to wake up or go to bed thinking about what's going to happen in the political climate because I don't control it.
How do you find those people to give you advice? How did you find them when you were 12 or 16, when you were 25? Who do you look for to give you advice? And what's the thing that you seek out most when you meet somebody new? What do you want to know about him or her?
Yeah. So for me, I missed 70 days my senior year of high school. An interesting old story that I haven't told for a long time, but I actually got out of high school at 11 o'clock, both my junior and senior years of high school, and half of my grade was from the landlord of my ski shop, because I actually had a retail ski shop at a shopping center when I was in 11th and 12th grade. And the guy said, so long as you pay your rent on time, I'm going to give you an A. So I started with a 4.0, which was good, because the other part of my grades basically would have had me at an F. When you combine them together, I was like a 2.0 student. 50% for the rent on time and 50% for my very poor grades and my poor attendance. So, for me, this skill set that I always had was to be a sponge, to be a good listener, to ask good questions, to have great people around you. I got a guy, my little brother, Robert, sitting in front of me.
Make sure everyone knows that. Yes.
Yeah. He's my younger brother, Robert Kraft, who's a guy who I'm fortunate to spend a lot of time with, and I'm always listening and learning from him as an example, and that helps me to be smarter. And there are times I'll pull him aside afterward and say, I picked that up, and he'll say, I saw that you picked that up. So, to me, if you have great people around you, they're going to learn from you, and you're going to learn from them. And to me, I think, that's about having great people around you.
Lastly here, just a question about how you handle a company growing. A lot of people here helming companies that are growing and growing fast. What's a piece of advice you would give people here about how to navigate that? The desire to be bigger and do more, and at the same time hold on to the core values of the company.
Yeah, so this sounds a little bit cheesy, but I really believe it. I think it's really all about the people that you have around you. We're always... I think we have a great team at each of our companies, but we're always strengthening that team. So we don't ever look at it and say, like, anytime you ever say you're done, that's like for about 10 minutes, and then you keep strengthening your team and building your team. So, and by the way, a lot of times you can do that with people you have, and a lot of times the people you have can't rise to the next level as the business is growing. Fanatics was when we spun out of eBay, it was a $250 million business in 2010. It's going to be, $2.2 billion this year, 7 years later. So some of the teams the same team, and a lot of teams completely different. And so to me, it's about building teams and knowing, who can grow with you and who you need to put into a different role or isn't going to be the right person to grow the business. And I think if you have the right strategy and you have the right team and you have the right leadership, you're generally pretty well set up to be successful.
Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Michael, I have a question for you. Amazon, when you made that call, did you buy the stock? When you said when it was a $30 billion company?
When Amazon was a $30 billion company?
You said you thought it was going to be a much bigger company?
Yes, I never bought their stock, and I've actually talked people out of buying their stock to their detriment. Matter of fact, I will tell one great last story. So, at the NBA, they do this tech summit every year, and it's off the record. And one year, there was a company that I was very negative on, and I've said it was literally one owner said it was a great company, and I said it was the greatest short in the world. The following year, it was down by 90%. I couldn't have been more right. It was like I was good. The next year, because I couldn't control my stupidity, they asked me, Michael, this stock was down by 90%. What's your recommendation? I said, Amazon's a hold. And that was about $250. I said, so clearly my point is you get some right, you get some wrong, but I've never been a Amazon buyer because I wish them nothing but the worst.
Michael Rubin, thank you.